Released about half a year ago, The Outer Worlds proved that even if Bethesda doesn't make traditional open world or Western RPGs, someone else can step up to the plate. In my original review that I posted last year when this game was originally released, I described it as an RPG that gave you more story the more effort you put into it, featuring a strong foundation that took parts from Fallout and Mass Effect while adding its own flair to it. Outer Worlds raised the bar for Western RPGs. Now the adventure continues on the go with Nintendo Switch, but how well does the port hold up? The Outer Worlds opens up with a mad scientist waking you up from cryosleep. You, along with a bunch of other colonists on a ship, should have arrived at your destination and woken up years ago. You didn't though, and now the scientist has woken you up and needs your help finding resources to wake up the rest of the colonists. Whether you choose to help them or not is up to you. But it's this event that acts as a catalyst to the rest of the story, and that's ultimately in your hands. You see, while you were asleep, the rest of the colony ships started to colonize the Outer Worlds. Corporations started to get rich, capitalism expanded, and the poor citizens essentially gave up their rights and pride to these companies, becoming slaves to them just to survive. Outer Worlds can take you as little as 20 hours and as long as 60 hours, and that factors down to the choices you make and how you go about completing the quest. A lot of the quests in the Outer Worlds are optional, but they're also incredibly interesting and fascinating. Missions can appear or activate based on the smallest of actions, talking to an NPC about a skill they need to learn, or perhaps trading a favor for a favor that can then lead to a new optional quest. These quests add hours of playtime to your final total, should you choose to go on them. Even then, you can complete some of these quests by simply thinking logically. If someone has something that you need but will only give it to you in return for a favor, why not just shoot the person and take it by force? Outer Worlds is a game that wraps its story around your actions, and for that very reason, you can do things like that. Its lore and story are told through not just quests, but the conversations, the computer logs, and the description on things. The most minute details that you would skip in just about any other game mean so much more here, like something outside of control. The Outer Worlds begins with a basic but acceptable character creator. Although some other features and options would have been welcomed, what's here feels satisfactory and entertaining as we get to choose the job we did before the events of the game. In classic Obsidian writing, each job gives us a different stat boost and clever description that explains why it makes sense. After creating your character, you're launched onto the planet's surface and our adventure begins. The Outer Worlds isn't an open world RPG, but rather a large multi-sandbox game that somehow still mimics the feeling of exploring an open world. Perhaps it's the visuals, the design of the world, or something else, but I felt the urge to want to explore the environment. This would often lead me to realize how this wasn't an open world, but also plenty of secret optional quests I would otherwise never come across if I hadn't gone off the beaten path. Companions eventually join you on your adventure should you choose to let them. They're great allies that are more than just NPCs that help you out in battles. Their personalities make them feel like unique characters, sometimes getting you to love them or hate them. In battles, they aid you taking on the enemy, like using special skills that activate these cinematic attacks. Combat feels significantly faster than what you're probably used to with Fallout. It's better in my opinion, using a variety of close quarters, long range, melee, and even science weapons, and for a variety of combat. Science weapons are humorous and hilarious to see in action, like the shrink ray that lets you shrink enemies. The gunplay here isn't the best in terms of action games, but it's one of the best when it comes to action RPGs. It's a faster pace than something like Fallout with a greater emphasis on precision aiming. That's most apparent with the TTD ability that acts as this version of Fallout's VATS. TTD, or Tactical Time Dilation, slows down time for a few seconds to let you land critical hits on an enemy. Shoot an enemy's arm and you might just injure the arm that they use to hold their weapon. Additionally, this Nintendo Switch port offers new gyroscope controls that are a complete blessing. Where the other console versions offer heavy aim support, the addition of more precise aiming thanks to the motion controls is truly appreciated. It's something I wish was in the BioShock collection, and I'm glad it's in this. Outside of combat, the companions feel like vital parts of conversations that are frequently sprinkled throughout the campaign. These conversations, regardless if serious or comedic, have a large assortment of responses that can let you answer something seriously or snarky. Depending on your skill set, if you have enough persuasion and leadership, you can talk a leader out of their position. It makes just about every RPG element fit into each other, simply just working flawlessly. Companions even chime into conversations with their takes on the topic. I often found multiple companions conversating on our own ship, having their takes, and that's refreshing to see. It made them feel more human. Well, here's the part of the review most of you have been waiting for, and that's how well The Outer Worlds runs on Switch. Well, it's playable and it works, but like a Little Caesars hot and ready pizza, just because it's hot and ready, doesn't mean it tastes very good, or plays well in this case. Of course, no one should expect 1080p 60fps performance out of a small Tegra X1 tablet when running a current generation Unreal Engine 4 game. However, this is way more than just a game running in the PC equivalent of low settings. First off, performance. The Outer Worlds runs at 1080p dynamic in dock mode and 720p dynamic in portable mode. Realistically though, those benchmarks are rarely met, and instead, you'll mostly see 720p in dock mode and 540p in portable mode. The frame rates on the other hand target 30fps, and while it's able to hold that for the intro of the game, the more I progressed into the campaign, the worse it got. Over the course of the story, the frame rate average went from 30fps to more like the low 20s. The evolution of the more complex cities and enemy counts just proved too much for the Switch. Character models, environments, and cities all lose details, most of which are the loss in texture quality. It's astonishing really. I didn't expect high quality textures, but the amount of pop-in and rendering here pushes the limits of tolerable. Signs and buildings, for example, will load between a terrible to bad to okay level of quality over the course of a few seconds to a minute. And speaking of 30 seconds to a minute, that's about how long the loading screens are for this game, including the new ones that appear during gameplay, not just in between transitions. Where last year I was shocked to see how well an open world Western RPG could run after seeing The Outer Worlds on Xbox One X compared to something like Fallout 76, in this instance with the Switch port, I'm shocked to see the Switch run Outer Worlds even worse than Skyrim running on PS3. The Outer Worlds does a lot with very little when it comes to its music and sound. You see, with a game from Obsidian and as ambitious as this, I expected way more from its music, especially in terms of scope. However, it's not because it has a grand orchestra track or anything. It's instead because it's reserved for how little instruments each song uses. That's not a knock on it though, because music in The Outer Worlds is great, with the most notable tracks coming up while exploring the wilderness. The sound design is well done too. Guns have a loud, powerful kick sound to them that makes them satisfying to shoot. What stands out the most though is the performance by the voice actors. Although the voice work may not always be in sync with the character models, the performances here are stellar. The Outer Worlds on Nintendo Switch is impressive, not because it looks great, but because it exists. It's more of a fun experience and experiment than a recommended purchase in my case. It's extraordinary that this was able to run on Nintendo Switch, but the increasingly bad performance over time and decrease in quality tarnishing the atmosphere of the setting makes it hard to enjoy this version. While yes, this is technically still the same game I reviewed last year and gave a 9 out of 10, this is a terrible way to play it. You're better off getting it on a different platform or just skipping this release altogether.